As the 18th century drew to a close, Tarrare, a man with one of the most remarkable and controllable appetites ever documented, strolled through the streets of France, leaving a memorable mark on medical history. Wine corks, stones, bags of apples, dozens of eggs, live animals, his stomach accommodated unimaginable quantities of edible and inedible items, and it seemed that nothing could satiate his hunger. Being thrown from his home by his parents, he publicly showcased his eating habits and became a sensation. Crowds would gather to witness Tarrare devouring everything in sight. Tarrare's life was sad and arduous. His insatiable appetite was an immense source of suffering. Stories circulated about him, including chilling tales of being found in the hospital morgue, gnawing on corpses, or drinking the blood of other patients. Although his life story sounds like something from a horror novel, this man truly lived. Unsupported rumors even claimed that he had consumed a toddler. Ultimately, a tragic fate awaited him, both in life and after death. Tarrare piqued the interest of scientists. Despite various theories, the mystery of his appetite remains unsolved. Tarrare was born near Lyon around 1772. His date of birth is unrecorded, and whether Tarrare was his real name or a nickname is unknown. As a child, Tarrare had a huge appetite, and by his teens, could eat a quarter of a bullock, weighing in as much as Tarrare himself in a single day. By this time, his parents could not provide for him and had forced him to leave home. For some years after this, he toured the country with a roaming band of thieves and prostitutes, stealing and begging for food before gaining employment as a warm-up act to a traveling charlatan. Tarrare drew a crowd by eating corks, stones, and live animals, and by swallowing an entire basket full of apples one after the other. He ate ravenously and was particularly fond of snake meat. In 1788, Tarrare moved to Paris to work as a street performer. He appeared to have been successful in general, but on one occasion, the act went wrong, and he suffered severe intestinal obstruction. Members of the crowd carried him to the Hôtel Dieu hospital, where he was treated with powerful laxatives. He made a full recovery and offered to demonstrate his act by eating his surgeon's watch and chain. M. Giraud, the surgeon, was unimpressed by the offer and warned him that if he did so, he would cut Tarrare open to recover the items. Despite his unusual diet, Tarrare was slim and of average height. At 17, he weighed only 100 pounds, or 45 kilograms. He was described as having unusually soft fair hair and an abnormally wide mouth, roughly 4 inches between his jaws when his mouth was fully extended, in which his teeth were heavily stained. When he had not eaten, his skin hung so loosely that he could wrap the fold of skin from his abdomen around his waist. When full, his stomach expanded like a huge balloon. The skin of his cheeks was wrinkled and hung loosely, and when stretched out, he could hold 12 eggs or apples in his mouth. His body was hot to the touch, and he sweated heavily. He constantly had foul body odor. He was described as stinking to such a degree that he could not be endured within a distance of 20 paces. This smell became noticeably worse after he had eaten. His eyes and cheeks became bloodshot, a visible vapor rose from his body, and he became lethargic, during which time he belched noisily and his jaws made swallowing motions. Despite his large food intake, he did not appear to vomit excessively or gain weight. Aside from his eating habits, his contemporaries saw no apparent sign of mental illness or unusual behavior in him other than apathetic temperament with a complete lack of force and ideas. On the war of the First Coalition outbreak, Tarrare joined the French Revolutionary Army. However, military rations were insufficient to satisfy his appetite. He carried out tasks for other soldiers in return for a share of their rations and scavenged on the dung heap for scraps. But this was not enough to satisfy him. He was admitted to the military hospital with a case of extreme exhaustion. He was granted quadruple rations but remained hungry. He scavenged for garbage in gutters and refuse containers, ate the scraps of food left by other patients, and crept into the apothecary's room to eat the poultices. Military surgeons could not understand his appetite. Tarrare was ordered to remain in the military hospital to participate in psychological experiments designed by Dr. Corville and Pierre-François Percy, surgeon-in-chief of the hospital. Corval and Percy decided to test Tarrare's capacity for food. A meal had been prepared for 15 laborers near the hospital's gates. Although typically, hospital staff restrained Tarrare from the presence of food, on this occasion, Corval allowed him to reach the table undisturbed. Tarrare ate the meal of 2 large meat pies, plates of grease and salt, and 4 gallons of milk, and immediately fell asleep. Corval noted that Tarrare's belly became taut and inflated like a giant balloon. On another occasion, Tarrare was presented with a live cat. He tore the cat's abdomen open with his teeth, drank its blood, and proceeded to eat the entire cat aside from its bones before vomiting up its fur and skin. Following this, hospital staff offered Tarrare a variety of other animals, including snakes, lizards, and puppies, all of which were eaten. He also swallowed an entire eel without chewing, having first crushed its head with his teeth. After several months he spent as an experimental case, military authorities began to press for Tarrare to be returned to active duty. Dr. Corval wanted to continue investigating Tarrare's eating habits and digestive system. He approached General Alexandre de Beauharnais with the suggestion that Tarrare's unusual abilities and behavior could be put to military use. A document was placed inside a wooden box, which was in turn fed to Tarrare. 2 days later, the box was retrieved from his excrement, with the document still in good condition. Corval proposed to de Beauharnais that Tarrare could thus serve as a military courier, carrying documents securely through enemy territory with no risk of them being found if he was searched. Beauharnais called on Tarrare to demonstrate his abilities before a gathering of the army of Rhine commanders. Having swallowed the box successfully, Tarrare was given a wheelbarrow filled with 30 pounds of raw bull lungs and liver as a reward, which he immediately ate in front of the assembled generals. Following this successful demonstration, Tarrare became employed officially as a spy of the army of the Rhine. Although General de Beauharnais was convinced of Tarrare's physical capacity to carry messages internally, he was initially concerned about his mental state and reluctant to entrust him with significant military documents. Tarrare was ordered as his first assignment to carry a message to a French colonel, imprisoned by the Prussians near Neustadt. He was told that the documents were of great military significance, but in reality, de Beauharnais had merely written a note asking the colonel to confirm that the message had been received successfully, and if so, to reply of any potentially helpful information about Prussian troop movements. Tarrare crossed Prussian lines under darkness, disguised as a German peasant. Unable to speak German, he soon attracted the attention of locals, who alerted the Prussian authorities, and he was captured outside Landau. A strip search found nothing suspicious on his person, and despite being whipped by Prussian soldiers, he refused to betray his mission. Brought before the local Prussian commander, General Zogli, he had again refused to talk and was imprisoned. After 24 hours of captivity, Tarrare relented and explained the scheme to his captors. He was chained to a latrine, and eventually the wooden box emerged. Zogli was furious when the documents, which Tarrare had said contained vital intelligence, transpired only to be de Beauharnais' dummy message. Tarrare was taken to a gallows, and a noose was placed around his neck. At the last minute, Zogli relented and Tarrare was taken down from the scaffold, given a severe beating, and released near the French lines. Following this incident, Tarrare was desperate to avoid further military service and returned to the hospital, telling Percy that he would attempt any possible cure for his appetite. Percy treated him with laudanum, without success. Further treatments with wine vinegar and tobacco pills were likewise unsuccessful. Following these failures, Percy fed Tarrare large quantities of soft-boiled eggs, which also failed to suppress his appetite. Efforts to keep him on any kind of controlled diet failed. He would sneak out of the hospital to scavenge for offal outside of butcher shops and to fight stray dogs for carrion in gutters, alleys, and rubbish heaps. He was also caught several times within the hospital drinking from patients undergoing bootlegging and attempting to eat the bodies in the hospital's morgue. Other doctors believed that Tarrare was mentally ill and pressed for him to be transferred to a lunatic asylum. Still, Percy was keen to continue his experiments, and Tarrare remained in the military hospital. After some time, A 14-month-old child disappeared from the hospital, and Tarrare was immediately suspected of having consumed the toddler. Percy was unable or unwilling to defend him, and the hospital staff chased Tarrare from the hospital, to which he never returned. 4 years later, in 1798, an MTCA of Versailles hospital contacted Percy to notify him that a patient of theirs wishes to see him. It was Tarrare, now bedridden and weak. Tarrare told Percy that he had swallowed a golden fork 2 years earlier, which he believed was lodged inside him and causing his current weakness. He hoped that Percy could find some way to remove it. Percy, however, recognized that he had advanced tuberculosis. A month later, Tarrare began to experience continuous exudative diarrhea, dying shortly afterward at 26 years old. The corpse rotted quickly. The surgeons of the hospital refused to dissect it. Tessier, however, wanted to find out how Tarrare's intestines differed from an average person and was also curious whether the golden fork was lodged inside him. At the autopsy, Tarrare's gullet was found to be abnormally wide, and when his jaws were opened, surgeons could see down a broad canal into the stomach. His body was found to be filled with pus. His liver and gallbladder were abnormally large, and his stomach was enormous, covered in ulcers and filling most of his abdominal cavity. The fork was never found. So why did Tarrare eat so much? Tarrare suffered from polyphagia, a medical condition characterized by uncontrollable hunger and eating. However, polyphagia is not a disease in itself, it's a symptom. Doctors still don't precisely know the exact cause of Tarrare's excessive eating. Medicine at the time wasn't as advanced as it is now, and it's not surprising that he wasn't diagnosed or treated adequately. One initial thought might be deception. The stories about Tarrare's incredible appetite may have been exaggerated or fabricated. While this possibility exists, it's improbable. Percy later became the chief surgeon at the French army, a pioneer in military surgery. His scientific works were considered reliable enough to be reprinted in France and England's most authoritative medical journals. Difficult as it may be to believe, a person of such reputation falsifying a case like this is unlikely. Moreover, Tarrare was observed and studied by more than just Percy. Contemporary doctors attempted to ponder what might have happened to Tarrare. According to them, a brain examination would have revealed an enlarged amygdala, the part of the brain regulating body temperature and responsible for the sensation of hunger. This would explain why Tarrare constantly sweated and always wanted to eat. In simple terms, the part of his brain that should have signaled that he was full was damaged. Other theories include severe iron deficiency, which could induce a craving for the same food, or damage to the hypothalamus in the brain, leading to excessive overeating. Perhaps Tarrare experienced a traumatic brain injury in childhood. These reasons, or a rare combination, could have influenced Tarrare's extraordinary eating habits. The solution to Tarrare's mystery is complicated because no one in the modern world is known to be like Tarrare. All the health disorders mentioned above are documented and exist today. In contrast, people with uncontrollable hunger exist, but no one is known to have reached the level of Tarrare. Another uncertainty is why Tarrare didn't gain weight despite constantly eating unimaginable food. People with an impaired sense of hunger usually struggle with weight gain. The reason may be entirely different. For example, he might have had parasites in his stomach feeding on what he ate. Since Tarrare often consumed raw meat, the theory about parasites is more than plausible. Regardless of the cause, Tarrare was not a freak, but a tragically fated individual. We hope you've enjoyed the story of Tarrare the Glutton. We would love to hear from you in the comment section below if you have any questions or thoughts about the video. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.